What if I told you that England once had a queen whose deepest devotion was not to her throne, but to a child that never existed, that she ruled with the conviction of divine purpose, yet was haunted by the phantom echo of a heartbeat within her own body? This is the story of Mary Tudor, known to history as Bloody Mary, a woman torn between faith and flesh, crowned in hope and undone by the cruel trick of her own longing. She was born on a bitter February morning in 1516 at Greenwich Palace, the only surviving child of Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Outside, the Thames rolled thick and gray beneath the winter fog. Inside the palace, bells rang with celebration. England had its princess, its precious link to the old Spanish blood that bound the Tudor dynasty to the power of Aragon and Castile. Her father, then a proud young king in the prime of his reign, called her the pearl of my world. Her mother, pious and gentle, whispered Spanish lullabies as the infant Mary slept beneath embroidered canopies. But as the years unfolded, the air within the Tudor court grew heavy with disappointment. Catherine bore no more living children. The infant boys who might have secured the line died in their cradles, leaving Mary as her father's only heir. In another world, perhaps that would have been enough. Yet in the 16th century, a girl's birth was a political inconvenience. To Henry, who longed for a son to carry his name, Mary became both miracle and failure, a child loved yet never sufficient. As she grew, the court around her shifted like ice breaking on a frozen river. She watched her father's affection turn elsewhere, first toward mistresses, then toward one woman in particular, Anne Boleyn, whose dark eyes and unyielding ambition would unmake Mary's world. Henry's desire for a new queen and a male heir became a storm that swept through England's faith and family alike. When Rome refused his annulment, Henry broke with the church, and Catherine was cast aside. Mary was declared illegitimate. Her mother was sent away. The once adoring father forbade them from meeting. For a young girl of 16, raised on lessons of duty, obedience, and the sanctity of marriage, the wound ran deeper than exile. It was spiritual betrayal. She had seen her mother weep through long nights of prayer, whispering to saints for justice. Mary learned that love and faith were things to defend, even when the world mocked them. When Catherine died, Mary wore black for months and refused to recognize her father's new wife. The act branded her defiance in the eyes of the new court. But beneath that stubborn faith was a seed of sorrow, a fear that God Himself might be testing her, punishing her for sins she did not know. The crown, the church, her family, everything sacred had been split in two. From that fracture, Mary's fierce piety took root. Years passed. Kings fell, queens were beheaded, and England swung like a pendulum between belief and heresy. Henry died, leaving a kingdom divided between his Protestant reforms and the remnants of Catholic loyalty. His sickly son Edward ruled briefly, a child king manipulated by powerful men who feared Mary's devotion to Rome. She, the daughter of a cast-off queen, became an exile in her own country, isolated, watched, sometimes openly despised. And yet, in the summer of 1553, when Edward's frail body succumbed to illness and Lady Jane Grey's usurper crown faltered, England turned its eyes to the rightful heir. Against the ambitions of men and the tide of religious reform, Mary rode into London, a queen. Her procession was thunder and incense. Bells pealed through the city as thousands knelt along her path. To the faithful, she was salvation itself, a woman sent by God to restore the old religion. To others, she was a storm returning from exile. At 37, Mary Tudor was finally crowned. The long years of humiliation, of being denied her birthright, seemed vindicated. Yet even amid the triumph, she was painfully aware of time. Her father had sired children from 3 wives. Her mother's line had produced none but her. She had no husband, no heir, no child to continue her faith and blood. And in a world where legacy defined power, Mary's womb was her kingdom's most fragile hope. When Philip of Spain arrived, a tall, austere prince with cold eyes and calculated charm, the heir of England turned anxious. The marriage was political, designed to secure Catholic strength through alliance. But for Mary, it was more than treaty. It was divine providence. She saw in Philip a partner, perhaps even a savior, through whom she might fulfill both love and duty. God has remembered me, she told her ladies, as if announcing a prophecy. The wedding in Winchester Cathedral in 1554 shimmered with gold and candlelight. The scent of myrrh and orange blossom filled the nave as choirs sang in Latin. Mary, radiant in crimson velvet, walked toward her groom with trembling hands. For the first time in decades, she felt chosen, not as pawn, but as bride. That night, as storm winds beat against the shutters, courtiers whispered of a queen restored to happiness, a union that might heal both heart and kingdom. Then came the first whispers of pregnancy. It began with fatigue, nausea, and a missed course. Her belly softened, then slowly swelled. Her breasts grew tender. The court physicians smiled knowingly. The news spread through London before she herself announced it. Bells rang again. Bonfires blazed. Letters flew across Europe proclaiming the miracle. The people prayed for a prince. At Hampton Court, servants readied the birthing chamber. Walls hung with tapestries of saints, a cradle of carved walnut placed beside her bed. Mary walked among the preparations with eyes bright from faith. He moves within me, she told her chamberlain one morning, hand pressed to her abdomen. But the days stretched on. The due month came and went. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors. The midwives kept vigil, listening for signs that never arrived. Perhaps it is delayed, one murmured, as holy children often are. Mary smiled faintly at that, unwilling to doubt what she had prayed so fervently to receive. Yet when June gave way to July, her swelling receded. The nurses left in silence. The cradle stood unused. For weeks, she refused to speak of it. The court moved on with measured delicacy, addressing her only as Her Majesty. No one dared utter the word false. In private, she wept. The failure was not only personal, it was cosmic. How could God, who had restored her throne and her faith, deny her this? She spent long hours before her chapel's candlelit altar, whispering rosaries until her fingers bled from the beads. Philip grew distant, retreating into councils and correspondence. To him, her phantom pregnancy was an embarrassment to be managed, a political misstep. To her, it was a trial of divine patience. She told herself that faith demanded endurance, that the promise would return in God's time, and in that persistence, the illusion took root once more. By 1557, when her body began again to swell, hope surged like a second dawn. Though now older, paler, and often confined by illness, Mary declared before her council that she was again with child. The Lord has quickened my womb, she proclaimed. The courtiers bowed, though their eyes betrayed unease. England prepared once more for a royal birth. Letters were drafted, naming Philip as regent should she die in labor. Outside the palace, rumors thickened that she was with child, that it was a girl, that the Holy Virgin herself had blessed the conception. Yet within the heavy silence of her chamber, the truth grew uncertain. Her belly was taut with fluid, not life. The pain in her joints worsened. Her breath came short. Physicians whispered words like dropsy, tumor, ill humor of the blood. But to the queen, whose life had been one long act of faith, disbelief was blasphemy. Each night she prayed aloud, Lord, let me not be barren in thy sight. Her voice echoed through the stone vaults, trembling with desperation. Sometimes she would wake from restless dreams, convinced she felt movement inside her, a flutter, a turn. She would call for her maids, who would press hands to her abdomen and nod silently, unwilling to break the illusion. In those moments, hope was real enough to touch, but as autumn came, her strength faltered. The swelling grew heavier, pressing against her lungs. Her legs thickened, her sight blurred. Still she clung to belief, dictating her will, naming the unborn child heir to the realm. When no labor came, only fever, she withdrew once more into prayer, a figure of haunted piety. She died that November, 42 years old, the air in her chamber thick with incense and the scent of wilted flowers. Some said she passed murmuring her mother's name. Others swore she whispered, Philip. Her physicians, finding no trace of pregnancy, recorded their confusion in silence. Perhaps it was water, perhaps disease, perhaps something beyond knowing. In the streets, the people wept and rejoiced in equal measure. To her supporters, she was a martyr of faith. To her enemies, the end of tyranny. Elizabeth ascended, and Protestant England was reborn. The fires Mary had lit in Smithfield, those grim burnings of heretics, became her legacy in popular memory. Bloody Mary, they would call her, forgetting the girl who once sang lullabies in Spanish, who had been the lonely daughter of a broken marriage, who had prayed for a child that never came. Yet history's cruelty lies not only in judgment, but in omission. For beneath the title and the flame, Mary was a woman whose body betrayed her faith. Modern scholars call it pseudocyesis, phantom pregnancy, a condition where mind and flesh conspire to mimic creation. Science tells us it can arise from hormonal imbalance, from grief, from yearning so intense it alters the body's rhythm. But science cannot describe the anguish of a queen kneeling alone in candlelight, feeling life where none existed, whispering prayers to an empty womb. Her phantom pregnancies were not delusion alone. They were the culmination of a lifetime's hope to vindicate her mother, to heal her country, to prove that God still favored her. Every missed heartbeat, every imagined flutter was a rebellion against the silence of heaven. Centuries later, her story still trembles between pity and fear. The queen who burned heretics also burned herself with devotion. Her body became a reliquary of expectation. Her reign, a sermon on the peril of faith without mercy. And yet, somewhere in that tragedy, there remains a strange tenderness. A woman believing so fiercely in creation that her body obeyed her conviction even to its own undoing. When one stands today in the echoing halls of Hampton Court or the dim chapel at St. James's, one might imagine her presence lingering in the incense haze, a faint scent of rosewater, the rustle of brocade, the whispered plea Blessed Mother, make me fruitful. Perhaps in some spectral echo, the cradle still rocks in her empty chamber. History remembers her by the fires she kindled. But listen closer, and you may hear another sound, the slow, hollow rhythm of a heart waiting for a child who never was. If you've walked with her through this shadowed journey, through the prayers, the hope, the silence, thank you for listening. If stories like this move you, stories where history's ghosts still breathe beneath the crown, remember to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss what comes next. Leave your thoughts below. Do you see Mary as a tyrant of faith or a prisoner of hope? This has been History Illuminated, where we give voice to the forgotten hearts behind the throne. Until next time, keep the candles burning and the past alive.